Today we're going to be tying what a lot of people call a hare's ear nymph, but I'm using Zonker strips, not really hare's ear, so I guess we could call it a rabbit fur or hare's fur nymph. So I'm going to go ahead and tie on some thread, and then once you've got that done, make sure you pull out a juicy Zonker strip. I'm going to take a pinch of this fur, and you want to cut all the way at the base of it. And that's because what you're going to do is you're actually going to use the leftover fuzzies that you're going to pull out when you separate it from the clean tips of it. The tips part, you're going to use that for the tail of this fly. And you're going to separate kind of the fuzzies from underneath it into a little pile on your desk, and then use that as the dubbing for the body of the fly next. So make sure you save all that. If you have a different color you want of actual dubbing, you can use that too, but I like to maximize my materials. So once you've got the pretty tips of the fur picked out from the fuzzies underneath, tie it in the back of the hook. I usually leave about half to almost a third of the length of the hook pass behind the bend of the hook for the length of that tail. Then you're going to take some Flashabou and tie it in at the back. You're doing this preemptively because what you're going to do is take the dubbing, make a body, and then wrap that Flashabou upwards towards the front of the hook to look like kind of like a ribbing. So make a dubbing noodle with the fuzzies from the Zonker strip. I always just do it in one direction, and I don't put any wax or anything special on my line. Make some wraps around the hook going forward towards the front end of the hook. And you want to make sure that the body if you think about the way that most nymphs look, it goes from skinny at the back to fatter up towards the top of the hook or the front end of the hook. And so that's what I'm kind of trying to do here with my super fancy stick with Velcro on it. Trying to build out the body a little bit. I think I'm going to actually put some more dubbing on here. Yep. So put on a little bit more if you feel like you need it. Go all the way almost to where it's covered the entire shank of the hook. You're going to leave a little bit of space there for some hackle that you're going to put in. But once you've gotten to this point, you're going to go ahead and wrap the Flashabou that you've tied in a little bit earlier. I love the way that this Flashabou looks. A lot of people will use wire instead, which also looks great. I didn't have any wire that was small enough to work with this fly, so I just used some Flashabou. But pretty much anything flashy that will stick out against kind of a dull gray color will work. I'm using like a Mylar. This isn't even like flash material. I bought this off of, it was like a door hanging thing that goes in between doors that I saw at Walmart one time. And so I just bought a bunch of it, and now I use it to tie into flies. You're tying this in first, and then you're going to tie in your pheasant tail, because it's going to add this nice little flashy strip at the top of the fly when you finish it off. So now that you've tied in like that Mylar strip, then you're going to tie in some pheasant tail. Try to make it so that it wraps around the hook, so that when you pull it over, it encompasses the hackle that we're going to put on here in just a minute. So this is some saddle hackle. I'm using a piece that's relatively small since this hook is just a size 10. For me, that's a really, really small hook, even though most people that would be just a normal or larger size hook for fly fishing if you're fishing for little trout. But down here in Austin, Texas, I catch a lot of perch and bass, and they really just don't go after tiny. They will go after tiny flies, but you'd be catching like microscopic fish with that out here. And so if you want to catch something that you can really fill your hand with, which you'll see in this later on in this video, I'm going to go fishing with this fly and just catch the smallest fish, but it helps to have a slightly bigger fly. So wrap the hackle forwards up to the hook and tie it in. Then you're going to bring the pheasant tail over it. So notice how I'm pulling the hackle one direction while the pheasant tail I'm pulling in the opposite direction. That's because you want the feather strands to go backwards, almost like wings or legs. And then after you've gotten that secured a couple wraps, make sure it's nice and tight, because that pheasant tail will sneak out sometimes. And then you're going to do that Mylar, and you want to make sure that that also is tied in pretty tight. snip it off. I'm going to do a couple more wraps and clean up the saddle hackle a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some UV resin. It looks like I'm going to do some knots first, which it makes sense. Should probably do more knots as you tie the fly so you don't lose your progress in case your thread snaps. So tie in some knots to make sure you have it on hold. And then we're going to probably either put in some glue or some resin. So I'm going to put in some Loctite glue here. You don't need that much. You really just need it to stay in place. Make sure that dries before you put in your resin. So I've sped it up so that it's drying while time is going by quickly. Then this is going to be some UV thick. I'm really going to put a good amount on top of that shiny bit of the Mylar because it really makes it pop. And I feel like fish really see that. It stands out a lot in the water when it lands. Hit that with the UV torch. Make sure it's nice and dry. And then you're actually going to finish it off with some UV thin, which is going to make it look even better. You put the thick on first, and then you finish it off with the thin, which is like a polish almost. And it just makes that little shiny spot positively glow in the sunlight when you're throwing it in the water. That is the Hare's Fur Nymph. And if you stay tuned, I'll take you fishing on Town Lake, and we'll catch some fish with it. Alright, so here we are on Ladybird Lake, and the way that I fish this is I'll throw it and let it sit for 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, and then I'll start to twitch it to make it look like it's swimming away or fleeing, and then it's pretty easy. You can feel that the fish hit it, especially out here kind of next to Barton Springs, and just catch a bunch of little perch with it. It's super fun to fish with a small rod, like a 3-weight or on a Tenkara rod. And in Central Texas, this fly would probably be best in like flowing streams or the Guadalupe River, where you're going to catch some Guadalupe bass or some bigger perch. You could also probably fish it next to docks and catch some pretty big perch and even some bass if they're just sitting there. But I really love catching these perch. There's so many different kinds in Austin, and they're super colorful. So every once in a while you get a really cool looking one. But thanks for watching my video. Please subscribe and like, and let me know how I can improve. This is the first of many videos that I plan on doing in the future.